Uh, Good evening, everyone. So today we'll resume with the session of Indian Express, and good to be back. Yes. So we'll start with the session, and there are some news which I found that are relevant. And from the very first phase, minority tax for Hindu, government seeks till the time, GST collections. So starting with this news, GST collections. See, the collection in the GST has increased. Largely the factor being that inflation is high, so the prices of the objects have or the consumer products have increased, and this is one of the major reason that there is this increment in the 1.5 lakh crore, second highest ever, is the collection of the GST has increased to this extent. The point being that it does not necessarily reflects the economy. Largely it is the inflation. It is the inflation which is deriving the product or increasing the prices of the product, and the GST conclusion or GST has increased to a significant extent. Further, there is this festival season and marriage season which is also has increased the overall collection of the GST. Now, the important part, that suppose if a question is asked that what are the factors that influences GST, so inflation, because inflation increases the product due to as the prices increase due to higher demand and the low purchasing power of the money, that's why product prices of the product increases. So interesting and important with the case of pre, that it has increased the demand of the overall product. Now, the second news, minority tax for Hindu, government 6 times, tells SC it is sensitive. What is the overall the news in this case? Now, this is the news, minority tax for Hindus, government 6 the more time. So the thing is that who are the minorities in case of India? Now, the important part, that only those communities which are notified under Section 2C of the National Commission for Minorities Act 1992 by the central government are regarded as a minority. Now, this was the case. Now, after a judgment of the Supreme Court 11, which is popularly known as TM Pai case, it has clearly determined that the linguistic and religious minority must be identified at the state level rather than the national level. You see that till now, in fact, the last accord in 2014, Jan was accorded the minority status by the central government. So this is the point, that if it is decided by the state and it is under the purview of the state, then how come the central government is deciding that who is a minority? Largely the population and the percentage wise representation of a particular community in a particular state. In this case, the point being that Hindus are in minority in Jammu and Kashmir. So the benefits that are associated with Article 30 of the Constitution should be provided to the wherever to a particular state wherever the any population is in minority. This is not being applied on Hindu, and it is as per the discretion of the central government, which in necessarily clear violation of the principle led by the Supreme Court. So in this context, the Supreme Court asked that who is a minority in India, and as when the Attorney General said that, this is a complicated issue, we will read it. So, after only a conclusion will come, then it will be part of the news. But right now, the important thing that was to be understood, that after TM Pai judgment, it depends upon the discretion of the state, not on the central government, yet it is not being followed by the overall situation in the law. Now, the minorities in India, Muslim, Christian, Sikhs, Buddhist and Zoroastrian. Further, Jain was added in this community. So, this was the important news on the first page. Now, coming back again to the newspaper. In the second page, this issue is ongoing, and probably right now we will have a definitive report, because now the Mobi issue is said that this bridge was not repaired. So ultimately it significantly it represents the lackluster attitude of the government, or for that matter any other accountability enforcing mechanism. So this was the part of the news. Now yes, this is another important news from the perspective of the example, that how a kind of triviality is being followed in case of policy making. So there is this very interesting law, Parkinson's Green's law of triviality, in which it says that when it is related with some usual kind of policy making, then not much deliberation is being done. So this remains an interesting case, though enacted with a good intention, but the intention was not followed properly. In this case, in Dalit Bandhu schemes in Telangana, where some families were given one-time payment of 10 lakh rupees to start a small business, many people ended it up as buying a Maruti Artiga car or the cement mixtures, but ultimately they are not reaping benefit of it. And this is a major problem, that you see that probably we are talking about many times populism, though not ultimately related to populism, but in general it shows that how policy is being enacted to show or do something which has a very fruitful result on the ground. In this case, people are not aware that awareness is missing, that where to use this product, this was not understood by the people, and they bought whatever was in the popular demand, hoping that ultimately it will give them some benefit. But that has not ended well for many of the participants in this case, and some people are saying that they will request the sarpanch to return back the item in exchange of something. So you see, that's why this policy remains a curious example that how in public policy there are systematic problems, or the awareness, how awareness is important in that any of the public policy formulations. Now there is this India Water Week which was celebrated at the Greater Noida, and with a theme of security for sustainable development. Important from this perspective of the one-liner question, that there was India Water Week was celebrated, and the theme was security for sustainable development. Security for sustainable development, and subsequently it was realized that in case of development of the nation, that how it can be contributed for the well benefits or sustainable part, and the growing cities are there. So how water can be used in best sustainable way. So this was about the part. Now there is this very important news or related with the election commission. There were two news subsequently in which it was said that yes, SC Supreme Court disposes of the plea as AG says efforts are on to find the solution. This is important news, and this has been ongoing with the basic presumptions that when you are not able to exercise your right to vote, then what purpose does democracy solve? In this case, a FPIL was filed for the NRIs and for the migrant population. So they are not able to vote. And in fact, few days back we have studied and we have seen that how a advisory was issued by the state government, state election commission Gujarat, name and shame policy, though ultimately Election Commission of India has denied it, but ultimately it remains a big issue that you see that holidays are not there. A significant population of the migrant are working in the interstate. So the cost of going to the places where they live and vote is very high. Moreover, due to certain conditions, and particularly the conditions of ordinary citizens, so they are not able to make the voters ID card at their new residential places. So this is a problem, and based on that problem, SC, somebody filed the PIL and requested for the voting rights to be issued to the migrant population. So we will try to analyze that what is the overall situation with the migrant population. Now, according to 2011 census, number of internal migrants stands at the 45 crore. 26%, that is 11.7 crore occurs inter-district within the same state. 12% of the migration, that is 5.54 crore. Just we are talking about India only. 5.4 crore peoples are not able to vote at their native place due to these restrictions. Now, permanently requited interstate, though it is possible, but in case of interstate, it is their chances are very high. Further, they are, short-term migration, 6 to 6.5 crores. Half of these are interstate migration. Now, migrant labor mostly hails from the poverty-driven areas, SC, STs and OBCs. Uttar Pradesh and Bihar were the largest source of interstate migrations with 83 lakh and 63 lakh population respectively according to the 2011 census. So you see, with this such big magnitude of the migrant population, it will be very hard for one to go back to their native places, and ultimately it results in some anomaly of the election procedures. Now, what are the issues? Low turnout in the source state, economic constraint disables a majority of the population workers from voting as they cannot commute to their home states on polling day. One survey shows that only 48% of those surveys voted in 2009 Lok Sabha elections, when the national average was 59.7%. So you can remember this data and you can use it in writing GS2 or the essay answers where the data is important. In 2000 state election, major center states such as Bihar and UP had among the lowest voter turnout rates. So lowest voter turnout is also creating a situation. Now, ordinary resident criteria, and this has a multiple manifestations as we will see it. Given the nature of migration being circular and seasonal, migrants are not permanently long-term resident in the host city is one. So they do not satisfy the requirement of the being an ordinary resident under the section 20 of the RPA Act in the host state to obtain the voters cards. They are therefore unable to transfer to their constituency. So this is the major problem. Moreover, even when they are awarded the voters ID card, this results in son of the soil policy. And this is the major reason why you see that there is a violence against migrant in this northeastern state, particularly Assam and Maharashtra, and to some extent Gujarat also. Because in this state, migration rate is very high. You have seen that crisis during the times of COVID, and it was also highlighted by Punchy Commission that as they change the demography of the overall situation, son of the soil policy generates. So even this, now here is true contradiction. One, that they are not satisfying the criteria of ordinary resident. Two, that the issue is more complex, because if you will give them the voting right or the voters ID card, it will result in the son of the soil policies because, or retaliation, because they will be changing the demography, and this is one of the major reasons. And we have seen that there are retaliations against the migrant population in this Bombay or particularly Pune. And with, for example, one particular political party, that is Samajwadi Party, wins a particular seat in Bombay every year. So this shows that there is some issues with the overall population. Now coming again back to the newspaper. This is what the President has said in the One Day Water Week, that water resource can be used as a weapon by any country and take the form of international conflict. This is important to understand. This part, water resources can be used as a weapon by any country and take the form of international conflict. We have seen this in case of India, China, and probably this propensity will only increase. Further, India, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. So you see that sustainable use of the water is very important in this case, and in all these three cases we have seen that there is a tendency, there will be a propensity for the international conflict. Further, there is this news, and this is very interesting news, though only on the margins of the pages. Incognito midnight visit by Health Minister in Ram Manohar Lohia. The central government has decided to dispense away or to completely dispose the system of marshals and the bouncers which were introduced in the hospitals on the demand of doctor after the incidents of violence. So this is the issue. You see, basically they are the caregivers. And when these caregivers are surrounded by the bouncers and marshals, so it creates a kind of trust deficit. And particularly the confidence building measurement is not there. So, and probably this was not done in isolation. Somehow and somewhere there was flaw and fault associated with the overall system. So there are two views in which we can visualize this news. One that is by playing to the public gallery, that yes, the issues are there and people don't like it, so we will be completely disposing the system, or just leaving the system of marshals and the bouncers who are there for the protection of the doctors. The important part, that why there is violence, which we have to understand. The reason for violence, there is heavy burden. The people always allege that doctor has killed someone, and we have discussed that in case of Mausammi juice, case of Allahabad. We have seen that. So you see that the crunch, the failure of the primary and secondary level hospital or secondary care hospital is resulting into the overburdened tertiary care hospital. And there have been many incidences of violence against the doctors. So you see that this throws a paradox, that there should be an environment which should be conducive for the protection of doctor. Though there have been many situations and protests and strikes by the various medical councils and resident doctors committee, where they highlighted that the violence is increasing only, but at the same time the law is taking its course, and the punishment by the law is also awarded who takes unnecessary force against the doctors. For example, 3-year punishment is there. But ultimately the situation is not improving. So rather we can say this is a plastic surgeon on a more serious problem. It is just stopping that, yes, the problem was there, that ethically they should not be surrounded by the marshals, as they are in the care of duty business or ethical care business. Ethics of care does not warrant any such situation, but ultimately the reality is different from what is being perpetuated by the media. So say probably in the government hospital there are significant chances that yes, there can be issues. So this was one of the important news in this case. Now there is this another judgment by the High Court, which we just will keep in mind because it is not that important. So in this case, it is said that the POXO Act, which is done for the welfare of the children, overrides some of the protections of the personal laws. In this case, there was this girl who was married, but she alleges that there was the incidences of the violence, and in this cases, personal law will be subservient to the overall welfare measure of POXO. So this was one of the important, and it is in the developing stage, so we will not comment upon it. Ultimately it will be reviewed by the Supreme Court, and from where they will form the judgment. But it is an important issues with respect to welfare and probably move towards the UCC. Now we will try to see that. Now this is another news important from the perspective of the connectivity, but Jaishankar has said, our Foreign Minister has said that it should not be at the cost of erosion of sovereignty or you just cannot play with the sovereignty of any other country. In this case, where there was SCO summit, where most of the country came in support of the China's BRI project, foreign minister said that no, if you are playing with the sovereignty of any country, this can be problematic. So ultimately, it relegates the position that even India is also emphasizing upon the free trade routes and free sea routes, free right to pass, everything. And if you are, in case of China, they are not giving the sovereignty, and in case of India, they are just trying to hurt the Indian sovereignty. So this is the case. So just can be used anywhere, particularly not that important, but this is just a minor piece of the news. Now here, this is the news which we have already discussed, bit of physical room, though ultimately it is short term, but not that important, and we have discussed that GST wala part in case. Now this is important, which will be saying that how there is that even after the direction from the Supreme Court, it is not being followed. It will be on the explained page, which will be discussed. Third news in this case is statement by Pratap Bhanu Mehta. Now he is saying that what is important part here is that he is trying to highlight upon that how right is converging with the left in case of public policies. Here they are saying that even the right government of India just try to preserve PDS and MG Nirega. Same the issues will be with the Lula president, with Lula, the president of the Brazil, where he have to conserve the rightist, he have to protect the rightist measure taken by the right government. So this will be a challenging, but it is not there. But yes, the parallel is drawn, but not that important. But this can be used in the showing that how the necessity of the requirement of the economy or the requirement of the public is changing the overall ideology of a political party. Now, another important news in this case is the issues which have been ongoing and which we have discussed it, but here the facts are given, and we have to remember this fact. Case is Arif Muhammad, the governor of the Kerala, versus the ministers that is going from quite some time. Here in NCT versus Delhi case, it was led that the Supreme Court had stated the real power must be vested with the elected representative, as we are a representative democracy. So I believe that it solves some of the problems. Further, here this is the important line, and it can be used in the essay. The important line being, where discretion is absolute, man always suffered. Now this is the part, this is the quote which can be asked in the essay. Here, so on this base, what is discretion? Discretion is analyzed by the Sir Edward Coke, who is considered as one of the famous legal luminaries. Does discretion as a science of understanding to discern between falsity and truth, between wrong and right, between shadow and substance, and not do according to man's wills and private affection. This was the part which was highlighted by the Sir Edward Coke. Now, they have just built on the issues and some judgment which is given, which just try to reinforce the position that government is just an advisory. He does not have necessarily the power, de jure head. So, in Nabam Rabia case, Chief Justice has exercised that the exercise and executive power by the government is by and large notional, that is de jure head, and he is often referred as the titular head of the government. In fact, the Hari Vishnu Kamat Constitutional Assembly in fact tried to present an amendment where the discretionary power would undermine the tenets of the constitutional elected democracy. So this was done in the constitutional debate itself. So largely this article pertained to this part only. Now the rest of the news are the political news. Yes, a famous personality, Jamsetji Irani, who is considered as the steel man of India, and he has this vision, and probably he was the first man who introduced the 8-hour working shifts round the clock in the Tata Steel factory. So this is the important part about that. He had the vision. He introduced for the first time in India, he has introduced the 888 shift hour of for the first time in case of India. Now, the other news on the, yes, there is this news that Kerala launches women-friendly tourism. set to become friendly tourism destinations. Mission ensures safe and hygienic places for the women. So it will be first woman friendly discussion state in India. Now there is this news that science and tech, coronal holes which smile on the face, they are saying that these gases are exiting the suns are not directly related to the solar parts. That's why these gases escape from the sun, and this leaves a dark spot, and it is largely because of the lower temperature of the gas and because of the magnetic field of the interplanetary space. So what is the impact that and how it is formed? That fast solar wind streams that they sometimes interact with the earth magnetic field create what is called a geomagnetic storm, which can expose satellites to radiation and create interference with the communication possible. Now geomagnetic storms relates to the earth's magnetic troposphere, the space around the planet influenced by the magnetic field. When a high speed solar streams arrive on the earth, it allows the energetic solar wind participate to hit the atmosphere over the poles. So storm can cause the change in the ionosphere part of the earth atmosphere. Now here this is another news about two-finger test. It was banned by the court, yet it is practiced at some places, and that's why the Supreme Court said that if somebody still practice it, it will point towards the guilty of the misconduct. Largely it was done on the rape victims, where it was guided by the Victorian morality. It was analyzed that a particular person is habituated or not. So in this case it was banned by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that it violates a woman's right to privacy and asked for the government to provide a better medical procedure to confirm sexual assault. So the habituation wala part is just dispensed away with. Now further there is this news, Russia pull out from Black Sea deal, the impact. Ultimately the future of the wheat trading increased by 5% because of the wheat, because there are so many ships. Russia and Ukraine are the biggest exporters of the wheat. So ultimately the food prices, which was increased significantly, nearly 20%, was reduced to 15%. The food prices will increase again, and it can create the problems for country as far as in Africa or across the world. India's role, we are suffering from the wheat crisis also. Now it remains to be seen that what is the issue and how the issue will be solved. Now further there is this news that before the COP27 at Sharm Sheikh, the targets are woefully short, and we are just touching around, this is important from the perspective of the data, we are touching around 50 billion tons of the carbon dioxide gas. 1% grew by over 1% on an average, though it is less than the last decade, yet we will not meet the standard with this rate. Now it is said that basically we know about that carbon dioxide gas that it lives into 100 years. Okay, now China has reversed by the 4 times, India by the 3 times, even Britain has reduced it by nearly half from the 1990 level, and America being the laggard state, not follower, it has reduced only it by the 7%. So before we go into this part, so it is imperative that we should curtail down and they have given the estimate that we have to give it the 15 billion tons of CO2, 33 billions by 2030 and 8 billions by 2050. If this target will not reach, then we are looking at the environmental crisis and rise in temperature by end of this century. So this was the major problem which was highlighted by this part. Further, for the first time, Reserve Bank had paid with the digital rupees, and important because it is now being used in the secondary market. So important from the perspective of prelims examination, that digital currencies are now being importantly used in the secondary market, and we have seen about the digital currencies. So largely this was the news from today. You have one essay topic about the discretion, you can refer it to it. So this was the news. Okay, thank you. हाँ आप लेट हो गए, मेरा सुबह का सेशन था.